Elena grew up in the small town of Grey Ridge, a place where hope seemed to fade as quickly as the paint on the broken fences that lined the streets. Her childhood was not painted in the colors of joy, but in the muted shades of struggle and survival. Her father had died when she was barely 6 years old, and her mother, burdened with debts and the daily grind of poverty, passed away when Elena was 13, with no one left to shield her from the cruelty of the world. She was taken in by her mother's sister, Aunt Clara, a woman whose bitterness toward life was poured out cruelly onto Elena. In Clara's home, Elena was less a niece and more a servant. She scrubbed the floors until her hands blistered, cooked meals she was rarely allowed to eat, and endured words sharp enough to wound her spirit every day. She often cried herself to sleep, clutching the only photograph she had left of her mother, whispering promises that one day she would escape and build a life worthy of her mother's memory. Yet, even in her suffering, Elena carried a quiet resilience. She had dreams that not even Clara's harshness could extinguish. She dreamed of studying, of finding a place where she belonged, and of someday being loved for who she truly was. While Elena's world was one of deprivation, far away in the shining heart of the city lived Adrian Blackwood, a man whose life appeared to be the very opposite of hers. Adrian was a billionaire, heir to an empire built on steel and innovation. He lived in a mansion of glass and marble, surrounded by luxury, and attended by staff who never let him lift a finger. Yet behind the towering walls and glittering lights of his wealth, Adrian lived in silence. His parents had died in a plane crash when he was 20, leaving him the company, the wealth, and the crushing weight of responsibility. Friends surrounded him, but none truly knew him. Women pursued him, but most were after his fortune, not his heart. The public saw him as a man who had everything, but in the quiet hours of the night, Adrian felt like he had nothing at all. He longed for someone who could see past the billionaire facade, someone who would love him for the man, not the fortune. Fate, in its mysterious way, began weaving their stories together on a stormy night. Elena, who had endured yet another evening of Clara's cruelty, slipped out of the house to find some air, some freedom, even if only for a moment. She walked along the old streets, rain soaking her thin clothes, when headlights suddenly blinded her. A black car skidded on the slick pavement, and before she could react, it struck her. Pain shot through her body as the world blurred and faded into darkness. When she woke, Elena found herself not in a hospital ward, but in a room that looked like something out of her dreams. Soft sheets, golden light, and a scent of roses. Panic filled her until the door opened and a man entered. Adrian Blackwood, the billionaire she had only ever seen in passing on the television, stood before her. His eyes, usually cold and distant to the world, softened when they looked at her. He apologized, explaining that his driver had swerved but couldn't avoid hitting her. He had insisted she be brought to his private estate so she could receive the best care. Elena's heart raced, not just from fear, but from the overwhelming strangeness of her situation. She had lived her life in shadows, and now she was in the house of a man who seemed to live in light. She tried to thank him, her voice trembling, but Adrian only shook his head. He asked her name, and when she answered, something in the sound of it seemed to stir him. In the days that followed, Adrian visited her often, far more than one would expect from a man so busy. At first, Elena thought it was pity that made him come, but she soon noticed the way his eyes lingered on her when she spoke, the way he listened to her stories of her mother, her struggles, her dreams. Adrian found in her something he had not found in anyone else: sincerity. She spoke to him not as a billionaire, but as a man. For the first time in years, he laughed without forcing it, smiled without pretending. But Elena's happiness was fragile, threatened not only by her cruel aunt, but by those in Adrian's world. When she returned briefly to Clara's house, Clara saw the clothes Adrian had given her, the softness in her cheeks from good food, and her eyes filled with greed. Clara saw opportunity and began to plot. At the same time, in Adrian's world, Marissa, a woman from a wealthy family who had long desired Adrian, grew furious at the thought of being replaced by a poor girl. Marissa was beautiful, cunning, and merciless. Together with Clara, whom she easily manipulated with promises of wealth, Marissa conspired to destroy Elena. The conspiracies unfolded like shadows creeping into daylight. Elena was accused of being a gold digger, of seducing Adrian for his wealth, Clara testified against her, fabricating lies about her niece's supposed schemes. Marissa spread rumors in the press, tarnishing Elena's name before she even had a chance to defend herself. Adrian's advisors warned him to let the girl go before his empire was dragged down with scandal. Elena, devastated, tried to leave Adrian's life to protect him. She packed her few belongings and slipped away one night, tears falling as she whispered goodbye to the only man who had ever seen her for who she was. But Adrian found her, standing at the train station with nothing but a small bag in her hand. He took her hand, his voice breaking as he told her he didn't care about the lies, the rumors, the betrayal. All he cared about was the truth he saw in her eyes. Their love deepened, tested by fire but unbroken. Together, they confronted Marissa and Clara. The truth eventually unraveled, as truth often does. Clara's greed was exposed, Marissa's manipulations revealed, and the world saw Elena for what she was. Not a schemer, not a gold digger, but a young woman who had endured suffering with grace, and who had captured the heart of a man the world thought untouchable. In the end, Elena and Adrian stood side by side, no longer billionaire and servant girl, but two souls who had found in each other the love they had both longed for. They married not in a grand display of wealth, but in a quiet ceremony beneath the stars, surrounded only by those who truly loved them. Elena wept as she held Adrian's hand, knowing she was no longer the girl who cried herself to sleep clutching photo. She was a woman who had found love, safety, and dignity. And Adrian, who had once believed his wealth could never buy him happiness, discovered that true wealth was found in the heart of the woman who stood beside him. Together, they built not just a life of luxury, but a life of purpose. Elena used her position to open homes for orphans, determined that no child would feel the loneliness she once knew. Adrian supported her every step of the way, finding joy not in profit, but in giving. The world would remember Adrian Blackwood as a billionaire, but Elena knew the truth. He was more than that. He was a man who had saved her, cherished her, and shown her that even in the darkest lives, light could be found. Their story was not one of wealth meeting poverty, but of love meeting destiny. And in that love, both of them found everything they had ever searched for.